stood in front of the massive crystal doors and tried not to feel small. The Galactic Institute stretched above him like a mountain made of light and metal. Ships from 100 different worlds floated in the sky overhead. Students who were not human at all walked past him in groups. Some had 4 arms. Some had skin that glowed. Some did not even walk but floated on cushions of air. He was the first human to ever attend this school, the first human to study among the stars. That thought made his stomach tight with nervousness. "You will do fine," his sister Hay had told him before he left Earth. She was a scientist who studied alien life. "Just be yourself. Show them what humans can do." Wished he felt as confident as she sounded. The doors opened with a soft hum. Inside, the entrance hall was even more impressive. The ceiling was so high that clouds formed near the top. A hologram floated in the center of the room, showing a map of the entire galaxy. Thousands of worlds were marked in different colors. A student approached him. She had blue skin and 3 eyes. "You are the human," she said. It was not a question. I will show you to your room." Followed her through corridors that seemed to shift and change. The walls displayed images of great thinkers from across the galaxy. He recognized none of them. That made him feel even smaller. "How long have you studied here?" he asked. 3 years, she said. "I study mathematics and dimensional theory. What will you study?" "Philosophy and ethics," said, "and human history." 3 eyes blinked in sequence. "Philosophy. You will have Professor then. He is very old, very wise. He has taught for 400 of your years." 400 years. Tried to imagine living that long and could not. On Earth, people rarely lived past 100. His room was small but comfortable. The window showed a view of 3 moons hanging in a purple sky. Sat on the bed and pulled out his tablet. A message from Hay was waiting. "Remember why you are there," she had written. "Not just to learn from them, but to teach them about us too. Good luck, little brother." Smiled. Hay was only 2 years older than him, but she always called him little brother. The next morning he attended his first class. The lecture hall was enormous. It curved in a half circle with seats for nearly 200 students. Beings of every shape and size filled the room. Found a seat near the back. Professor entered through a door at the bottom of the hall. He was tall and thin, with skin like polished silver. His head was shaped like a triangle, and his eyes were large and dark. He moved with careful, precise steps. "Welcome to Universal Ethics and Consciousness Studies," the professor said. His voice was deep and calm. "In this course, we will explore the fundamental principles that govern all sentient life in the galaxy." Took out his notebook and began to write. "All of you come from different worlds," Professor continued. "Different cultures, different biologies, but there are truths that apply to all thinking beings. These truths are not opinions. They are facts, proven by thousands of years of observation across 3,000 species." The professor waved his hand, and a hologram appeared in the center of the room. It showed a tree with many branches. Each branch was labeled with the name of a species. "We are all different branches of the same tree," the professor said. "The tree of consciousness, and consciousness follows rules. The first and most important rule is the principle of rational self-preservation." Wrote the words down. Around him, other students nodded as if they had heard this before. "What is this principle?" the professor asked. "It is simple. All conscious beings value their own existence above all else. When faced with a choice between survival and death, all beings choose survival. This is not a moral choice. It is a biological imperative. It is what consciousness is built upon." The professor looked around the room. His eyes passed over without pausing. "This principle explains why the galaxy is mostly at peace," Professor said. "War is inefficient. It risks destruction. Species that understand the principle of rational self-preservation do not engage in conflicts they might lose. They negotiate. They calculate. They choose the path that ensures their survival." A student in the front row raised a tentacle. "Professor, what about the wars? Both sides lost billions." "An excellent question," the professor said. "The wars occurred because both sides calculated they could win. Both were wrong. Once the true cost became clear, both sides immediately sought peace. This proves the principle. When survival is truly threatened, rationality prevails." Listened carefully. He thought about the history he had learned on Earth. He thought about the wars humans had fought. Many of those wars made no sense based on what the professor was saying. But he did not speak, not yet. He was new here. He wanted to understand how things worked first. The class continued for 2 hours. Professor explained how all galactic law was based on the principle of rational self-preservation, how trade worked because both sides benefited, which ensured mutual survival, how crime was rare because the punishment was calculated to outweigh any benefit. Everything was logical, everything made sense. Except kept thinking about Earth, about the stories his grandmother had told him, about the things he had read in history books. After class, he walked to the library. It was a vast space filled with data crystals and holographic books, found a quiet corner and began to research. He looked up Earth's history in the Galactic database. The file was small. Humanity had only joined the galactic community 20 years ago. Most of the information was basic: population, technology level, political structure. There was a note at the bottom: species assessment, potentially volatile. History shows frequent species conflict. Recommend careful monitoring. Frown, that was how the galaxy saw humans, as violent, as dangerous. But there was more to the story, so much more. He opened his own files, the ones he had brought from Earth, history, literature, news archives. He began to read, looking for something specific. Hours passed, other students came and went, barely noticed. Finally, he found what he was looking for. He sat back and stared at the screen. His hands were shaking slightly. Next week, Professor would give them another lecture on the principle of rational self-preservation. He would explain again how all conscious beings chose survival above everything else. And would have a question ready. A question that would change everything. The lecture hall felt different today. Could not explain why. Perhaps it was because he knew what he was going to ask. Perhaps it was because his heart was beating faster than normal. Professor stood at the center of the room, surrounded by floating holograms. Each one showed a different scenario: a ship in danger, a planet facing disaster, an individual trapped in a burning building. "Today we will examine decision matrices," the professor said. "These are the mental calculations all conscious beings make when facing crisis situations." Watched as the professor walked through each scenario. In every case, the beings chose the option that gave them the best chance of survival. The ship captain abandoned cargo to save the crew. The planet evacuated the most people possible. The individual in the building found the safest exit route. "You see the pattern," Professor said. "Consciousness is fundamentally self-preserving. This is not selfishness. This is the basis of all rational thought." A student asked, "What about sacrifice, when a parent saves a child?" "An excellent example of genetic preservation," the professor replied. "The parent is saving their genetic legacy. The child carries their DNA forward. From a biological standpoint, this is still self-preservation at the genetic level." Other students nodded. This made sense to them. "Let me present a thought experiment," the professor continued. A new hologram appeared. It showed a simple figure standing at a crossroads. A being faces certain death on one path, certain survival on the other. There is no third option, no hidden escape, pure binary choice. What does the being choose? "Survival," a student called out. "Obviously survival," said another. "Always survival," a third agreed. Professor smiled. It was a strange expression on his silver face. "Correct. Always survival. This is the foundation of consciousness itself. A being that chooses death over life is contradicting its own nature. Such a being cannot exist for long because natural selection eliminates such traits. Raised his hand. The professor noticed. Yes, the human student, you have a question. Every student in the hall turned to look at. He felt their eyes on him. He stood up slowly. Professor said, "What if survival is not the goal?" The room went quiet, so quiet that could hear the soft hum of the building's environmental systems. Professor tilted his head. "I do not understand the question. Survival is always the goal. It is the fundamental goal of all life." "But what if it is not?" continued. His voice was steady now. "What if the being chooses to die for something they believe is more important than living?" A student near the front made a sound like a laugh. "That is illogical. Nothing is more important than existence. Without existence, nothing else matters." "The student is correct," Professor said. He was still smiling, but there was something different in his eyes now. "Your question presents an impossibility. You are asking what if 2 plus 2 equals 5. It does not, cannot, will not." Took a breath. "Then how do you explain humans?" The professor's smile faded. "Explain what about humans?" "Humans choose death over survival regularly," said. "Throughout our history, in every culture, in every time period, we choose to die for things we believe in." "You are speaking of mental illness," Professor said quickly, "or genetic abnormalities. These are exceptions that prove the rule." "No," said quietly. "I am speaking of normal humans, healthy humans, humans who are celebrated as heroes." Professor stared at him. The other students were whispering now, could hear fragments of their conversations. "Is this true? Humans choose death." "That cannot be right." "Explain yourself," Professor said. His voice was harder now. "Provide evidence for this claim." Had been ready for this. He pulled out his tablet and connected it to the lecture hall's display system. "I can show you. I have thousands of examples from Earth's history." "No," the professor said sharply. "Not now. This requires proper examination, not scattered anecdotes. If you truly believe humans violate the principle of rational self-preservation, then you will present a formal case. Next week, you will have 1 hour to present your evidence to this class." Nodded. "I will." "I should warn you," Professor said, and now his voice was very cold. "If you are wrong, you will damage humanity's reputation in this institution. The galaxy does not look kindly on species that spread false information." "I understand," said, "but I am not wrong." The rest of the class passed in a blur. Barely heard what the professor said. His mind was already working on his presentation. After class ended, several students approached him, was among them. "You are brave or foolish," she said. "Professor has never been challenged like this." "I am just being honest," replied. Another student, a being made of what looked like living crystal, spoke. "If you are right, it changes everything we know about consciousness. Do you understand that?" Had not thought about it that way. But now that the crystal student said it, he realized it was true. If humans could choose death over survival, then the foundation of galactic philosophy was incomplete, maybe even wrong. "I understand," he said. That night called his sister on Earth. The communication delay was 3 seconds each way, but it was still good to see her face. "How are classes?" Hay asked. "I may have made a mistake," admitted. He told her what happened. Hay listened carefully. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "You did not make a mistake," she said finally. "You told the truth. That is never a mistake." "But what if I cannot prove it? What if they do not believe me?" Hay said, and her voice was firm. "Our great-grandfather died holding a line so his friends could escape. Our grandmother's friend Bo walked into a fire to save children who were not even his own. Dad's teacher refused to give up her students' names even when it meant prison. You have hundreds of stories. Thousands. Tell them. Make them understand." Felt better after talking to Hay. She was right. He had the evidence. He just needed to present it clearly. For the next 7 days, prepared. He barely slept. He went through Earth's history and found the clearest examples. He organized them carefully. He practiced his presentation over and over. Other students watched him in the library. Word had spread about what was happening. The human was going to challenge Professor. The human was going to claim that his species broke the fundamental law of consciousness. Some students thought he was brave. Others thought he was stupid. Most were just curious to see what would happen. Professor did not speak to during that week, but often felt the professor's eyes on him during other lectures, watching, waiting. The night before his presentation, could not sleep. He lay in his bed and looked out at the 3 moons. He thought about all the humans who had died for their beliefs, their causes, their loved ones. Were they wrong? Were they just genetically damaged, as the professor suggested? No, knew that was not right. Those people were not broken. They were the best of humanity. And tomorrow he would prove it. Tomorrow he would show the galaxy what humans really were. Tomorrow everything would change. The lecture hall was completely full. Students who were not even enrolled in the class had come to watch. They filled every seat and lined the walls. Word had spread across the entire institute. The human was going to present his case. Stood at the front of the room with his tablet. His hands were sweating. He had practiced this presentation 100 times, but now that the moment was here, his throat felt dry. Professor sat in the front row. His silver face showed no emotion. Next to him sat 3 other professors. They had come to witness this as well. "You may begin," Professor said. Touched his tablet. The main display lit up behind him. It showed a simple title, "The Human Paradox When Survival Is Not Enough." "Thank you for coming," began. His voice was quiet at first, but it grew stronger. "Today I will show you evidence that humans regularly choose death over survival, not because we are broken, not because we are sick, but because we are human." He brought up the first image. It showed an old photograph from Earth, black and white, grainy. It depicted a soldier lying on top of something round. "This is Private Lee," said. He was 19 years old. During a war on Earth, an explosive device landed near his group. He threw himself on top of it. His body absorbed the blast. He died instantly. His 6 friends survived. The room was silent. Private Lee knew he would die, continued. There was no chance of survival. He made a calculation in less than a second. His life in exchange for 6 others. He chose to die. A professor in the front row raised a hand. "This is kin selection. He saved his genetic relatives." "None of those 6 soldiers were related to him," said. "They were strangers. He had met them only 3 weeks before." He moved to the next image. A woman standing in front of a hospital. "This is Doctor," said. During a disease outbreak, she volunteered to treat patients even though she knew the disease was fatal. She worked for 2 months. She saved 43 lives. Then she caught the disease. She died 1 week later. Another image, a man holding a child. "This is Jin Park, not my relative, different family. There was a fire in an apartment building. He went back inside 7 times to rescue children. On the 8th time, the building collapsed. He died. He saved 11 children. None of them were his own." Continued showing images. Each one was a different human. Each one had chosen death for something they believed was more important. There was Bo, who ran into traffic to push a stranger out of the way, dead instantly. There was Sun, who gave up her place in a rescue boat during a flood. She drowned. The person she gave her place to survived. There was, who refused to reveal the location of refugees even under torture. He died protecting people he had never met. The examples kept coming. The students in the hall stopped whispering. They just stared. Professor had not moved. His dark eyes were fixed on the display. "These are not isolated incidents," said. Earth has recorded millions of cases like this throughout our history, in every culture, in every time period, humans dying for others, for ideas, for beliefs. He brought up a new image. This one showed a large crowd of people facing armed soldiers. "This is the uprising," said. "Citizens knew they would likely die. The soldiers had tanks and guns. The citizens had nothing, but they believed their cause was important. Hundreds died. They chose to die rather than give up what they believed in." A student called out, "But they hoped to win. They calculated a chance of victory." Some did, admitted, but many knew there was no chance. They went anyway, because some things are worth more than survival. He changed the image again. This time it showed firefighters walking into a burning building. "Every day on Earth people risk death for strangers," said. "Firefighters, rescue workers, medical personnel. They enter danger zones to save others. Many die doing this. They know the risks. They go anyway." Professor finally spoke. His voice was strained. "This can be explained through social contracts. These individuals benefit from a society that values such behavior. Their sacrifice ensures the society survives, which benefits their genes indirectly." "Then how do you explain this?" Brought up a new image. It showed a simple memorial stone. "This is the grave of my great-great-grandfather," said quietly. "During a military conflict, his unit was ordered to retreat. The enemy was advancing. Stayed behind with 3 wounded soldiers who could not walk. He held the enemy back for 18 minutes, long enough for his unit to escape. Then he died." His voice was steady, but his eyes were bright. Had no children yet, no genetic legacy. The wounded soldiers were not his relatives. His society did not reward his death because his society did not even know what he did for 10 years after. He gained nothing. His genes gained nothing. He simply chose that those soldiers' lives were worth more than his own. The room was absolutely silent now. "You see," said, "humans do not just survive. We choose what is worth surviving for. And sometimes we choose that the what matters more than the surviving." He brought up a final image. It was a quote in simple text. "There are things worth more than life. This is a common saying on Earth," said. "We teach it to our children. We build monuments to people who lived by this idea. We call them heroes, not sick, not broken heroes." Professor stood up abruptly. His chair made a scraping sound. Every eye turned to him. "This is," he began. He stopped, started again. "This violates the fundamental axiom of consciousness. If what you say is true, then humans are not rational beings." Or said gently, "Your axiom is incomplete." The professor's hands were shaking. Had never seen him show emotion before. Now the silver-skinned alien looked almost ill. "You are saying," Professor said slowly, "that humans regularly, normally, willingly choose death over survival. Not for genetic benefit, not for social reward, not because of mental deficiency, but as a conscious, rational choice." "Yes," said. "For ideas, for strangers, for abstract concepts like honor or duty or love." "Yes." "Even when survival is possible, even when they could live." "Yes." Professor sat down heavily. He put his head in his hands. One of the other professors spoke up. "This changes everything. If consciousness can override survival instinct, then all our behavioral models are wrong." "Not wrong," another professor said. "Incomplete, as the human said." Stood up from her seat. "How many humans are like this? Is it rare?" "Thought about it. Most humans never face such a choice, but those who do, I would say 1 in 10 chooses to sacrifice themselves, maybe more." 1 in 10, a student whispered. "That is millions of beings choosing death." Professor looked up. His eyes met. There was something broken in that gaze, something that had been whole before and was now shattered. "You have proven your point," the professor said. His voice was hollow. Class dismissed. Students filed out slowly, talking in hushed voices. Gathered his tablet. He felt drained, exhausted. Professor remained seated, walked past him toward the exit. "Human," the professor called. Stopped and turned. "Do you understand what you have done?" Professor asked. "I told the truth," said. "You have destroyed 400 years of my understanding," the professor said. "Everything I have taught, everything I believed about consciousness, about life itself, you have broken it." Felt a sudden wave of guilt. "I am sorry, Professor. I did not mean to." "No," the professor interrupted. "Do not apologize. You were right to speak. I asked for evidence. You provided it." The professor stood slowly. He looked older somehow, tired. "I must rethink everything now," he said. "Everything." He walked toward the exit on the opposite side of the room, alone. Stood in the empty lecture hall and wondered what he had started. 3 weeks passed. Professor stopped coming to class. A substitute professor took over. She was kind but clearly uncomfortable. Everyone knew why the original professor was absent. Tried to focus on his other classes, but guilt gnawed at him. Students whispered when he walked past. Some looked at him with respect, others with suspicion, a few with fear. "The human broke professor," he heard someone say in the cafeteria. "I heard the professor has not left his study in days," another student whispered. Found in the library one evening. "You should not feel bad," she said, sitting down across from him. "You told truth. That is what scholars do." "I destroyed his life's work," said. "No," replied. "You added to it. There is a difference." But was not sure she was right. That night he received a communication request. It was from an address he did not recognize on Earth. He accepted it. A woman's face appeared on his screen. She was older, with gray hair and kind eyes. Behind her could see laboratory equipment. "Hello," she said. "My name is Dr. Hay Park. I am your sister." Blinked in confusion. "Hey, what is this address? Where are you calling from?" "I am at the Galactic Research Institute on Earth," Hay said. "I was contacted 3 days ago by Professor. He wanted more information about human behavior, about sacrifice, about everything you presented." Stomach sank. "What did you tell him?" "The truth," Hay said. "I sent him our complete historical database, war records, medical records, testimonies, everything." "Hey, why?" "Because he asked," she said simply. "This professor is trying to understand. He has spent weeks studying human history. He watches videos of rescues and sacrifices. He reads testimonies from survivors. He is trying to make sense of what you showed him." And asked. Hay's expression became serious. "And I think he is having a crisis, a deep one. His assistant contacted me yesterday. She said the professor has not slept. He just studies and studies. He fills notebooks with calculations that do not work out. He tries to fit human behavior into his old models, and every time it fails." Felt worse. "I should not have challenged him." "Listen to me," Hay said firmly. "What you did was important. Yes, it is hard for him, but truth is not always comfortable. The professor spent 400 years believing something that was incomplete. You showed him that. Now he has to adjust." After the call ended, could not sleep. He kept thinking about Professor alone in his study, trying to make sense of humans. The next day heard that other professors were concerned. Professor had missed faculty meetings. He had stopped answering messages. His assistant reported that he sometimes talked to himself, muttering about the human problem. 4 more weeks passed. The institute buzzed with rumors. Some said Professor was writing a new book that would revolutionize philosophy. Others said he was losing his mind. Was walking to the library when he saw a crowd gathered near the medical center. His heart sank. He pushed through the students. "What happened?" he asked who was in the crowd. "Professor collapsed in his study," she said quietly. "They brought him here an hour ago." "Felt cold, is he?" "Alive," said. "But they say he had a complete psychological breakdown. His mind could not handle the contradictions." Wanted to run, to hide. This was his fault. But instead he walked into the medical center. A nurse tried to stop him but pushed past. He found Professor in a private room. The professor was sitting up in bed, staring at the wall. His silver skin looked dull. His eyes were unfocused. Professor said quietly, turned his head slowly. For a moment he did not seem to recognize, then his eyes focused. The human, he said, his voice was hoarse. You came. I heard what happened, said. I am so sorry, this is my fault. Your fault? The professor made a sound that might have been a laugh. No, this is my fault. I built my entire understanding on an incomplete foundation. 400 years, all of it, incomplete. It was not wrong, said desperately. Just incomplete, like you said. Your work is still valuable. Is it? Asked. I taught that all conscious beings prioritize survival, but humans do not. I taught that behavior can be predicted through rational self-interest, but humans act against self-interest regularly. I taught that consciousness follows universal laws, but humans, you break those laws. The professor looked directly at. Do you know what is most terrifying? Not that humans are different, but that other species could learn this from you. Frowned, what do you mean? Your sister sent me research, said. Studies showing that self-sacrifice is not genetic in humans. It is cultural, it is taught, it is learned. The professor's hands gripped the. If it can be learned, then any species can learn it. The cysteine. All of us could become like humans. We could override our survival instinct for ideas. Is that bad? Asked. For galactic civilization, perhaps catastrophic, said. Our entire society is built on predictability, on rational self-interest, on the assumption that beings will always choose survival. If that assumption fails. He did not finish the sentence. Sat down in a chair next to the bed. Professor, I think you are looking at this wrong. Explain. Humans are not less rational, said slowly, working through the thought. We are differently rational. We calculate value differently. For you, survival is the highest value. For us, survival is important, but it is not the only value. Love has value. Honor has value. Duty has value. Sometimes those values outweigh survival. Listened. You are not wrong, continued. Your mathematics work for most situations, but you need to add new variables, new types of value. Then human behavior makes sense again. The professor was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke. You are saying consciousness is more complex than we thought. Yes. More beautiful and more terrible. Yes. Closed his eyes. I am too old to rebuild my entire understanding of consciousness. No one is too old to learn, said. That is another thing humans believe. The professor opened his eyes and looked at. For the first time in weeks, there was a hint of his old self in those eyes, sharp, curious. Your species is very inconvenient, he said. Yes, agreed, we are. At that moment the door opened. A young human walked in. He stopped when he saw. Oh, sorry, the young man said. I did not know anyone was here. I am new student. They told me professor was my advisor. That is me, said weakly. Another human student. The universe has a sense of humor. Looked between them, confused. Did I come at a bad time? No, said standing. I was just leaving. He looked at Professor. Will you be okay? The professor sighed. I do not know. Ask me again when I understand what okay means anymore. Walked to the door. Behind him he heard sit down. So, Professor, said cheerfully, I am excited to study philosophy. My grandmother always said there are some things worth more than life itself. I want to explore what those things are. Heard Professor make a sound like a groan. Despite everything, smiled. 6 months later, received a message from the Galactic Council. They wanted him to testify at a hearing about humanity. The message did not say what the hearing was about, but had a feeling he knew. He arrived at the council chambers on the capital world of Prime. The building was ancient and massive, carved from a single piece of black stone. Inside, representatives from 300 species sat in a circular arrangement. Was led to a platform in the center. He felt very small. The council speaker was a species that looked like floating jellyfish made of light. Her voice echoed through the chamber. "Human," she said, "you are here because of an incident at the Galactic Institute, an incident that has sparked considerable debate across the galaxy." "I understand," said. "Professor has submitted a report to this council," the speaker continued. "In it, he makes a remarkable claim about your species. He says humans routinely override the survival instinct, that you choose death for abstract concepts. Is this accurate?" "Yes," said. Murmurs filled the chamber. The speaker raised a tentacle for silence. "This troubles the council," she said. "We have built galactic civilization on certain assumptions. One assumption is that all species can be reasoned with through threat assessment. If your species does not respond to threats of death, then our diplomatic framework fails." Had not thought about it in those terms. I see the problem. A representative from a species called the Stood. He was large and covered in scales. "The human species is dangerous," he said. "A species that does not fear death cannot be controlled, cannot be predicted. They are a threat to galactic stability." Other representatives murmured agreement. "With respect," said loudly, "that is not accurate." The turn to him, "Explain." "Humans do fear death," said. "We fear it very much. That is why our sacrifices mean something. We are not fearless. We are afraid, but we act anyway. There is a difference." The speaker tilted her body. "I do not understand the distinction." "Courage is not the absence of fear," explained. "Courage is acting despite fear. When a human chooses to die for something, they are not doing it easily. They are terrified, but they have decided something matters more than their fear." A new voice spoke. It was Professor had not seen him enter. The professor looked different, thinner, older, but his eyes were clear. "May I address the council?" asked. "Please," the speaker said. Walk to stand next to. "I spent 6 months studying humanity after my encounter with. I read thousands of historical accounts. I interviewed human psychologists. I watched recordings of human acts of sacrifice." He looked around the chamber. "At first I believed humans were broken, defective, but I was wrong. Humans are not broken, we are." Shocked silence. "Explain yourself, Professor," the speaker said. "We have built a civilization on survival," said. "On safety, on predictability. We have eliminated risk and wonder and passion. We exist, but do we truly live?" He gestured to, "Humans live. They do not just survive. They create art that serves no survival purpose. They explore dangerous places for no practical reason. They love so deeply they would die for it. They believe in ideas so strongly they sacrifice themselves. This is not insanity. This is what consciousness should be." A representative stood, "But this makes them unpredictable, dangerous." "Yes," agreed. "And also magnificent. Humanity will either revolutionize our galaxy or destroy themselves trying, perhaps both." The speaker was quiet for a moment. "What do you recommend, Professor?" "I recommend we learn from them," said. "Not to become reckless, but to remember that survival alone is not enough. There must be something worth surviving for." The council debated for hours, sat and listened. Some representatives wanted to limit human expansion. Others wanted to study humans more carefully. A few wanted to embrace human philosophy. Finally, the speaker called for a decision. "The Galactic Council has reached a conclusion," she announced. "Humanity will be granted special status. You will be classified as a philosophical hazard species." Frowned, "What does that mean?" "It means we acknowledge you are different," the speaker said. "It means we will approach diplomacy with humans differently than other species. It means we recognize that threats of violence may not work with your kind. She paused. It also means we are curious. Hundreds of species have asked to study human culture, to understand how you develop this trait. We have never seen anything like it. A representative near the back stood. There are concerns that this trait could spread, that other species might learn from humans to value things above survival. Is that not a good thing? Asked. We do not know, the speaker said honestly. It could enrich the galaxy, or it could destabilize everything we have built. Time will tell. The hearing ended, was told he could return to his studies. As he left the chamber, Professor caught up with him. Walk with me, the professor said. They walked through the gardens outside the council building. Alien plants grew in patterns that seemed impossible. The sky overhead showed two suns setting. I resigned from my teaching position, said suddenly. Stopped walking, why? Because I cannot teach the old curriculum anymore, the professor said. Not after what I learned. I am writing a new book. The consciousness of value, why survival is not enough. It will take years. Professor, I never wanted to end your career. You did not end it, said he. Smiled slightly. You transformed it. There is a difference. They walked in silence for a while. Can I ask you something? Said. Of course. If you had known what would happen, would you still have asked your question in class that day? Thought about it. He thought about the professor's breakdown, the council hearing, the galaxy's uncertainty about humans. Yes, he said finally, truth matters, even uncomfortable truth. Nodded. That is very human of you. They reached the edge of the garden. A transport was waiting to take back to the institute. Your question broke my mind, said, but it also freed it from a prison I did not know existed. I spent 400 years thinking inside a box, believing the box was the entire universe. You showed me there was more. I am grateful and terrified, but mostly grateful. What will you do now? Asked. Study, said. Learn. Try to understand consciousness again, but this time with my eyes open to all possibilities. What will you do? Keep learning, said. Tell more people about humans. Try to help the galaxy understand us. Good, said. The galaxy needs understanding, especially now. Boarded the transport. As it lifted off, he looked down at Professor standing in the garden. The professor raised a hand in farewell. Later that night called Hay. How did it go? She asked. Strange, admitted. The council is both fascinated and frightened by us. That seems reasonable, Hay said. We are fascinating and frightening. Laughed. I guess we are. I have news, Hay said. My research paper on cultural transmission of sacrifice behavior was accepted. 12 universities want to study it. Alien universities. That is amazing, said. It is also concerning, Hay said. If other species learn to value ideas over survival, what happens to galactic civilization? I do not know, said, but I think change was coming anyway. We just accelerated it. They talked for another hour about small things, about home, about family. When finally went to bed, he thought about Professor's question. Would he ask his question again, knowing the consequences? The answer was still yes. Because some things were worth more than comfort, worth more than safety, worth more than not disrupting the system. Truth was one of those things. Looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, 3,000 species were learning that humanity existed, learning that humans were different, learning that the rules they had believed for were incomplete. It would be messy, it would be difficult, but it would also be extraordinary. Smiled and closed his eyes. Tomorrow he would return to class. There were still so many things to learn, and even more things to teach. The galaxy was about to discover what it meant to have humans among the stars. And nothing would ever be quite the same again.